So UFC 290 is going to be coming up this weekend, and it is going to be International Fight Week. It's going to be such a good card. I cannot wait for this card. I will be doing a live UFC Fight Companion on my YouTube channel. I'll be doing a live stream chatting with you guys, talking about the fights as they happen. Before we do get into it though, we do have the We Want Picks 3-day free trial. You get access to all of We Want Picks' bets, as well as my article about this card and other cards like the PFL card coming up this weekend as well, and all sorts of other things, including like an AI that does pick fights as well. It didn't do too good this week, unfortunately, but we'll leave that to the side, as well as you do have my 125% sign up bonus to BetUS. And now with all of that out of the way, let's get into the picks. Let's get into the very first fight of the night. You've got Edgar Chairez taking on Tatsuro Taira, and the odds are pretty taxed. I mean, you got Tatsuro Taira at -900, at -1000 on one sports book, and Edgar Chairez at +600. And Edgar Chairez, I'm telling you guys, he is a live +600 underdog. This guy is going to be potentially the better striker in the matchup. The reason why I say potentially is we haven't seen a lot of Tatsuro Taira striking in quite a while, and it has been looking like it's improved as the time that his UFC career has progressed. However, at times, Taira has looked pretty sloppy on the feet, and his opponents have been able to land some pretty good shots on him. However, in this matchup, I do believe that Tatsuro Taira will be able to get Edgar Chairez down, which is where he's going to want the fight, and I think he eventually does find a submission. Edgar Chairez, if you guys are unfamiliar, he did fight against Clayton Carpenter on short notice as well. On Dana White's Contender Series, he did lose that fight. However, he did give Clayton Carpenter a very good run for his money, especially on the feet in that matchup, and Carpenter did have to resort to his wrestling to eventually win the fight. Now, Carpenter did manage to take Chairez down a couple of times, which is a very good reason to potentially pick Tatsuro Taira in this matchup. Keep in mind, he's a -900 favorite. I am picking Tatsuro Taira. I do believe once it gets down to the ground, Tatsuro Taira is just such an aggressive grappler. He's the real deal. He really is the real deal on the ground. I think Edgar Chairez could put up a good fight, but I can see Tatsuro Taira getting the submission probably in the first or the second round. Maybe Chairez goes out there and has a really, really good first round, but I think eventually he will slow down with the short notice nature of the fight, and also the fact that he is very big for 125 pounds. This guy is massive for the weight class. All of that weight cutting must put a toll on him, especially on short notice, and he did slow down on Dana White's Contender Series. I think he will slow down again here, and Taira will be able to take over towards the end. If it does get towards the end, I think Taira does get a submission at some point in the fight, but the official pick is Taira by submission in the first 2 rounds. The next fight of the night is Saaiaman taking on Terrance Mitchell, and I am going to be picking Saaiaman in this matchup here. Once again, you'll get a little bit of tax though, because Saaiaman is -400 to -450 on some sports books. Terrance Mitchell is about +300, +350. Terrance Mitchell has a very, very nice 15-2 record. However, the problem with him is the level of competition hasn't been too great. And when he did step up in competition, he did take on Kai Kara France on The Ultimate Fighter Season 24 in 2016. And he got KO'd in 30 seconds. Now, that fight was at 125 pounds. He has looked better now that he's moved up to 135. I do hope that that's a permanent change. I do think he looks better at 135 because this guy is 5'10", and he's pretty long. He's a good grappler, he's a good wrestler as well. And in the first round, once again, just like Edgar Chairez, he could find success against Saaiaman in the first round. But I do see Saaiaman taking the fight over. I believe Saaiaman defeated a better grappler in Steven Kozlow in his last fight, and he did just go out there and beat Mana Martinez, which is a very good win. Unfortunately, Saaiaman has racked up a couple of fouls during his matchups. I don't believe they're intentional, but maybe something to worry about. Maybe he gets another point deducted, because we have had point deductions before for the Saaiaman side. But I think Saaiaman goes out there. I think he finishes Terrance Mitchell. I do believe he goes out there and lands maybe a KO blow on Terrance Mitchell on the feet. What we've seen from Terrance Mitchell on the feet hasn't been the best, but when it does come to the wrestling and the grappling, Mitchell is a really good wrestler and grappler. He truly is. But I do believe that Saaiaman kind of does have him covered, especially on the feet where he knocked out Josh Wang Kim, which I was very surprised about. And obviously, he just keeps on getting better and better. Only 22 years old. He's going to be making rapid improvements. I think he goes out there and knocks out Terrance Mitchell at one point in the matchup. So give me Saaiaman by KO in this matchup. Now we move on up the card. A somewhat interesting rematch, because Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menifield actually fought very recently. This isn't a rematch, a couple of years removed, They only fought each other 4 months ago at UFC 284 in Australia, where it did end up being a draw. Alonzo Menifield pretty much had Jimmy Crute out of there at one point early on, but I believe it was Mark Goddard that was refereeing. I could be wrong, and he just let the fight go on. I mean, Alonzo Menifield is a very slight underdog on some sports books. You're looking at -105 to Jimmy Crute -115. However, on another sports book, you see Menifield at a favorite. So you are getting evens on this fight. I do believe that Alonzo Menifield knocks out Jimmy Crute in the first round. Jimmy Crute is a very good grappler. He's a fantastic grappler. However, my problem with Jimmy Crute is he's fallen in love with his hands too much. And the problem with Jimmy Crute is he's not a very good striker. This guy regularly does get compared to Ronda Rousey, and that is not a good thing. Ronda Rousey's striking, as we know, hindsight is 2020, but Ronda Rousey's striking is not very good, and neither is Jimmy Crute's. He's very hittable on the feet, and Alonzo Menifield packs a lot of power. I believe that Alonzo Menifield goes out there and knocks out Jimmy Crute. However, if the fight does go into the second round, Jimmy Crute probably will start to take over. However, the problem is as well, Jimmy Crute slowed down a lot in their first matchup as well. I believe Alonzo Menifield can defend the takedowns in the first round and will find the KO blow over the very hittable Jimmy Crute. But I do believe Jimmy Crute, if he survives the first round, if he can get the wrestling going early and often, and get the grappling going where he's a very, very good grappler, he could find a lot of success later on in the fight. So the official pick is Alonzo Menifield by round 1 KO. But Jimmy Crute could submit him in the second or the third round or win a decision. But I'm going to go with the KO power. I'm going to be going with Alonzo Menifield. I do believe he does find the finish over Jimmy Crute in the very first round. The next matchup is Vitor Petrino taking on Marcin Prachnio. And this is a good fight. I actually am looking forward to it. If you do look at the odds, you've got Vitor Petrino about -280. Marcin Prachnio is about +220-ish. There's a little bit of an asterisk on Marcin Prachnio. This guy got KO'd in the first round 3 times in a row. So we know that this guy can get KO'd. He went out there against Khalil Roundtree. Very good win. The problem is Khalil Roundtree just didn't show up in that fight at all. He managed to beat EK Villanueva, but everybody did that in the UFC. And then he beat William Knight in that weird fight. Lost to Lins, which he gassed out in the first round. So did Lins, actually. It was a pretty horrible fight. They were both gassed out. Terrible gas tank for both guys. But Marcin Prachnio seemed to look a lot better in his fight against William Knight than he did against Felipe Lins. Now, Knight didn't show up. He landed like 8 strikes the entire fight. But it was an improvement for Marcin Prachnio, and he didn't look too bad in that fight. The issue with this matchup for him, though, Vitor Petrino is going to come out there and try to take his head off in the first round. That is what Vitor Petrino does. I do say that, and he didn't try and do that at all in his last fight when he took on Anton Turkalj, where he went for offensive takedowns. There was a lot of wrestling in that fight. I believe Vitor Petrino landed 7 takedowns, and Anton Turkalj landed 5. And they were wrestling, and it was Vitor Petrino that was initiating a lot of the wrestling, which was odd, because he was taking on a guy which I would consider to be the grappler in the matchup, Anton Turkalj, and Vitor Petrino was inviting the grappling, he was inviting the wrestling. So not a bad thing for Vitor Petrino to kind of show a little bit more skills in his skill set, but I do believe he goes in there and marches in against Marcin Prachnio and knocks him out in the first round. That is what Vitor Petrino's done for his entire career for the most part. Aside from his last fight, you know, he went out there, went to war with Rodolfo Velato, knocked him out in the second round, knocked out all of his previous opponents in the first 2 rounds, and knocked out Rodolfo Velato in his debut in 25 seconds. I can see a world where Vitor Petrino goes out there and KOs Marcin Prachnio in under 90 seconds, but I do think he finds the KO at some point in the first round. I don't really see too much path to victory for Marcin Prachnio. I think if Prachnio wins this fight, he has to be ripping the leg kicks and ripping the body kicks and staying at range the whole time, but that's easier said than done when you've got Vitor Petrino, who is a good striker, who is a pretty technical guy, who does have the longer range, and is a very, very powerful guy. So I've got Petrino to win KO in the first round. We now move up to another prelim. You've got Esteban Ribovics taking on Kamuela Kirk. And if you guys know anything about me, you'll know I am a big fan of Esteban Ribovics, man. I love this guy. I love his fighting style. I love everything about him. He is such a fun fighter. And I think he wins by KO in the first round of this matchup as well. If we do go to Esteban Ribovics, I'm trying to find the odds right now. And talking, because I can't find it. Ribovics is -200. And Kamuela Kirk is +160. I like Esteban Ribovics a lot in this matchup. Kamuela Kirk is coming up from 145 pounds. Probably not the worst move for him, but Esteban Ribovics isn't the biggest 155-pounder either. Esteban Ribovics went out there, took on Loic Radzhabov on short notice, and got taken down a lot. Showed really bad takedown defense against a guy that is massive, 155 pounds, but every time the fight was on the feet, he was hurting Loic Radzhabov. Every single time he had the opportunity, he would hit Radzhabov with something big and hurt him. Ribovics' whole style is he runs forward, throws volume, has no regard for his own safety, and just goes out there and bombs away. I love his fighting style. He's one of the most exciting fighters on the roster. He's one of my favorite fighters. I think he's great. Kamuela Kirk is a guy with a really good grappling background. He's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He just doesn't really use it too much. He's a guy that likes to strike a lot. He did go out there and lose to Damon Jackson. Not really too much shame in that, I would say. But he did beat Marco Naramekani. He did beat a couple of guys in the LFA as well. But I think Esteban Ribovics is going to go out there, storm Kamuela Kirk, and find the KO blow in the first round. Ribovics is a guy that is very crowd favorable, I guess I should say. He's a fun fighter. He's a good grappler as well. If Kamuela Kirk wants to win, his best option probably is to go to the takedowns, because Ribovics should show pretty bad takedown defense against Loic Radzhabov. Now, I would say Loic Radzhabov probably is a better wrestler than Kamuela Kirk, especially with the size difference as well. But I can see Esteban Ribovics going out there, storming on the feet, KOing Kamuela Kirk in the very first round, and I think he can find a lot of success in this matchup, and it seems like the majority of Tapology does agree with that assessment. The next matchup on the card is Yazmin Jauregui taking on Denise Gomes. And this is a fun fight. This is actually a really, really exciting fight between two strawweights, two girls that are predominantly strikers, two girls that are aggressive, and two girls that are somewhat technical. I would say Jauregui is a technical striker, and I would say Denise Gomes isn't necessarily, but man, she is a fun fighter. If you do look at the odds, Jauregui is minus 400, Denise Gomes is plus 300, and I'm telling you this, Denise Gomes is going to fight for your money. She is going to go out there and she is going to scrap with Yazmin Jauregui. She is going to make her fight. She's going to come forward. She's going to bomb the way, and it's going to be up to Yazmin Jauregui to avoid the power shots and try and do her own more technical boxing, because she is a good boxer with a lot of leg kicks. She does throw leg kicks, but she kind of does have a very boxing heavy style where she kind of crouches down, leans forward quite a bit, has the hands and the guard very high. This is Yazmin Jauregui I'm talking about, and then likes to counter, likes to throw a lot of boxing combos. As for Denise Gomes, she goes out there and just brawls, man. She's a Muay Thai fighter for the most part, and she loves to scrap. She loves to brawl. I think Yazmin Jauregui should be the better striker, the more technical striker, but Denise Gomes is going to be there. And Denise Gomes is going to be there to potentially land a KO blow, because we have seen Jauregui hurt before. And I do believe that Denise Gomes does have the potential to go out there and pull the upset, but I do believe Jauregui is the much more well-rounded fighter. I think she has the wrestling and the grappling advantage in this matchup, and I think that she might genuinely have to go and look to use it. I think you are paying a lot of tax on Jauregui. I wouldn't put Jauregui in a parlay. I always am kind of on the don't bet women's MMA side, but this is a fight I wouldn't even bet an over or under round on, because this fight could go the distance. This fight could get a finish. Who really knows? Gomes went out there and dominated Bruna Brazil, who just didn't look like she wanted to be there after she landed a couple of good shots. And Yazmin Jauregui went out there, had a war with Estela Nunes, ended up finishing her. Had the war with Yazmin Lucindo, ended up going to the distance with her. Very, very fun fight for Jauregui. And Gomes is a fun fighter as well. This genuinely could be a fight of the night contender if it goes the way that I'm describing it. But I am going to go with Jauregui to win by decision. But Gomes has been underrated. 94% of people on Jauregui, minus 400 for Jauregui. I mean, Gomes could go out there and ruin us at all, because she is that kind of fighter. She is that kind of scrapper that's going to go out there and try and take it all and kind of get Yazmin into a brawl. That potentially could happen, but I'm going to go with Jauregui. I think you're paying way too much tax on minus 400 for it to be worth it. I think it's a fight to avoid and just a fight to watch and enjoy. The next fight is going to be Shannon Ross taking on Jesus Aguilar. I am a big fan of Jesus Aguilar. This guy's so fun to watch, man. If you do look at the odds, he is the favourite in the matchup as well. He's about minus 200, and Shannon Ross is about plus 170. Jesus Aguilar is fun to watch. And the reason why he's fun to watch, and this is going to sound disrespectful, but I don't mean for it to be, is because he's so short, dude. Like, this guy's really, really short, fighting guys that are taller than him, and he's boxing, he's just bombing away, he's just brawling away, going for takedowns, and then he ends up latching up like guillotines, dude. He got a guillotine over Erison Fahea on Dana White's Contender Series, and most of his wins actually do come by submission, but 4 of them happen to come by guillotine. It's insane how many guillotines this guy has, and I'm gonna pick him to beat Shannon Ross by guillotine in this matchup. I do believe that he can go out there and find the guillotine against Shannon Ross. Shannon Ross is a guy which His durability, I question. His will to win and his heart, I don't question. But his durability, I do question a lot. This guy took a lot of damage in his Dana White's Contender Series fight against Finisher Salvador. And then he went out there, made his debut against Gleison Rodriguez. Took a lot of damage in that fight as well. Ate a spinning back kick as well to the face, I'm pretty sure. He's just taken a lot of damage. He's been submitted before as well by Steve Erceg. He got signed off Dana White's Contender Series off that loss because I believe he was fighting with like a really bad illness or something along those sort of lines. But I don't know, man. I just can't see Shannon Ross dealing with Jesus Aguilar. I can see Jesus Aguilar going in there, trying to wrestle Shannon Ross and trying to latch up a nasty guillotine, which I do believe he's going to find. I've got Jesus Aguilar by submission, more specifically by guillotine. So give me Jesus Aguilar to win by guillotine in this matchup. The next matchup was meant to be Sean Brady versus Jack Della Maddalena, but Sean Brady has pulled out of the fight. I believe he's got some sort of infection in his elbow. But in the terms of Jack Della Maddalena, and probably the terms of most people from Australia and New Zealand, he did shit the bed, and he has pulled out of the fight. Sean Brady took a lot of offense to that, but it just is. It is what it is. He genuinely did shit the bed. That's literally what it means. And is not going to be fighting. But Jack Della Maddalena could be fighting anybody on this card, because I know that they're looking at a replacement. Last I heard is that Chris Curtis is the front runner at 185 pounds, which is insane. But keep your eyes peeled. You're going to get some Jack Della Maddalena news sometime soon. Now we move on. Robbie Lawler taking on Niko Price. I don't like this matchup for both guys. Honestly, this is a fight which could go either way. And it's going to sound crazy because Niko Price, you're looking at a price tag of like, I mean, doesn't mean for that to be intended, but you are looking at a price tag of minus 260 for Niko Price and plus 220 on Robbie Lawler. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I don't believe that Niko Price is very deserving of that price tag, especially with his recent performances where he hasn't really looked that good. And on top of that as well, he's been dealing with a lot of injuries lately. He went out there, took on Phil Rowe. Was a pretty good fight, somewhat competitive fight, but he didn't look very good. He beat Alex Oliveira to decision. Didn't really look that good either. And he's been losing to pretty good guys, to be fair. But he went to a draw with Donald Cerrone. And he's dealing with a lot of injuries in the back. He just hasn't been looking like the same guy. He's only 33 years old, but I'm telling you, he's not prime Niko Price anymore. Robbie Lawler, I don't need to tell you that he's not prime Robbie Lawler either, because he's not prime Robbie Lawler no more. However, I think Robbie Lawler has a good chance of winning this fight. I'm not going to pick him to win this fight, but I might. My pick might change, but I'm still going to go Niko Price. Very low confidence pick. There's not really much to break down here. It's going to be a striking fight. Niko Price doesn't really get takedowns, and when he does try and get takedowns, he's got like a 20% accuracy, so he does shoot for them, but he doesn't get them. And Robbie Lawler's wrestling probably still is good enough to keep the fight on the feet. Robbie Lawler's the guy that probably could land the KO blow in the matchup. I think Niko Price might win a decision over Robbie Lawler, but I don't know, man. It's a Robbie Lawler fight, and a 41-year-old Robbie Lawler fight. There's not really too much I can tell you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to be going with Niko Price by decision. Very low confidence pick. Very, very low confidence pick. But Robbie Lawler did look pretty good in his last fight against Bryan Barberena. Now, I don't rate Bryan Barberena too highly at all, so I wouldn't really rate that too good for Lawler. But, you know, it was kind of an accumulation of damage that finished him off, and I think maybe you could see that as well. So maybe Niko Price does find a finish, but Lawler looks good in the first rounds, but eventually the damage does just get too much for him in the matchup, and Niko Price ends up getting like a second or third round TKO. And then we move on to the main card. You've got Dan Hooker taking on Jalin Turner to open it up, and it hurts me to say this, but I'm going to pick Jalin Turner to win, man. I do like Jalin Turner. I do like Dan Hooker a lot. You guys know me. I'm a big fan of Dan Hooker, and I really am. And he's one of the guys that got me into the sport. I've picked him in most of his fights. I've suffered a lot because I've picked him in most of his fights. But, dude, I'm just a big Dan Hooker fan. You know, he's like kind of one of those guys that really did get me into the sport. Massive, massive fan of Dan Hooker. But he just don't have it no more to fight these guys in the rankings. You know, Jalin Turner's a young, up-and-coming guy that has proven himself to be a ranking level. You know, he went to a very close fight with Mateus Gamrot, who's now ranked number 7. Took him on short notice. Brad Riddell submitted him in less than a minute. KO Jamie Malaki. He submitted Brock Weaver. He also beat Joshua Cullibell. Like, Jalin Turner is on a mission to take out Australia and New Zealand, man. He's on a mission, and Dan Hooker is the last the final boss in the boss battle. It started with Joshua Cullerbell, and then it moved on to Jamie Malarkey, and then he started taking on the New Zealand boys like Brad Riddell, and now Dan Hooker's the final boss. And I think he knocks out the final boss in the first round. Jalin Turner is huge for this weight class. You don't need me to tell you that. Everyone else is going to tell you that, and he is very big for the weight class. 6'3", same reach as Dan Hooker, but Dan Hooker's also pretty big for lightweight as well, to be fair. It's amazing that he ever made 145, especially recently, but with all that being said though, Turner's massive for the weight class. He uses the size well. He's got very, very good striking. He's got very good grappling as well. His wrestling is probably where he needed the most improvement, and I do believe that Mateusz Gamrot fight probably did show that, because Gamrot was able to have a lot of success with his own offensive wrestling. But guess who Jalin Turner's training with now? He just started training with Khamzat Chimaev, so you know that he's going to be getting some wrestling looks in there. So Jalin Turner definitely going to be improving on the wrestling front. Maybe he even goes for takedowns against Dan Hooker. And another thing that I'm going to say is I wouldn't be that surprised if Dan Hooker went for takedowns on Jalin Turner. Do I think it would be that good of an idea? Maybe not, because Jalin Turner does have that nasty guillotine he finished Brad Riddell with. But if you do look at the odds, you're looking at pretty close odds as well for this fight. You know, Jalin Turner's sitting about -240. Dan Hooker's about +200. A lot of people were low on Dan Hooker when he took on Claudio Puelles. I picked him to beat Claudio Puelles because Claudio Puelles just is not the same level as Dan Hooker, and Dan Hooker showed that. And now he's back to the rankings. You know, he's proven time and time again when he beat up Nasrat Haqparast, when he beat up Claudio Puelles, he can beat the guys that aren't top 25 of the division. He probably can beat most of the guys that are ranked 25 to 15, but when it comes down to the top 15, Dan Hooker, man, like, it's no disrespect to him. He's just taken so much damage in his career. He had that fight with Michael Chandler where he got KO'd, but before that, the Dustin Poirier war. He went to war with Poirier. He went to war with Paul Felder. He's been to war with so many fighters. He's taken so much damage in his career. He's fought so many times. This is a guy that's fought at 145 pounds all the way up to heavyweight. Dan Hooker's done it all. He's done it all. But when it comes down to this fight, Jalin Turner's a young, hungry, up-and-coming guy, only 28 years old. He's still got his eyes on the belt. He's still got his eyes on the top 5. He's got years before he even is at the end of his prime. You know, he could be in his prime right now, but he still could be even reaching his prime. He's going to be making rapid improvements, training with Khamzat Chimaev. You know, his wrestling's going to be good for the fight. We know he's a good striker. We know he's a good grappler. If you can put it all together, I think it is a recipe for success against Dan Hooker, and I do believe that Jalin Turner's going to knock out Dan Hooker in the first round. It's going to be rough. It's going to be a lot of mixed emotions because I've got the Dan Hooker t-shirt up there right behind this camera. There's a Dan Hooker t-shirt. It's going to be rough, but I'm going to be going Jalin Turner by KO in the very first round. It hurts. I don't believe that this is going to be the belt order, but the next fight is Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis on this belt order. I'm going to be going Robert Whittaker. I am seeing way too many people picking Dricus du Plessis. Way too many people picking Dricus du Plessis. Robert Whittaker's -400, Dricus du Plessis +300, and those odds are justified. I'm willing to take the L. I'm willing to do the Lucas Tracy apology video if Dricus du Plessis wins. But I would be incredibly surprised if Robert Whittaker wins this fight. This is my Lucas Tracy moment. So hopefully the Artem MMA curse doesn't exist. But I'm all in on Whittaker, mate. Whittaker is just so much better than him. He's just so much better than Dricus du Plessis. But I'm seeing so many people picking Dricus du Plessis. A lot of people in the We Want Picks Discord, just as I'm recording this video, we're talking about how Dricus du Plessis is going to catch him and win. Like, what fights are you watching? Are you watching any of Dricus du Plessis' fights? I find it hard to believe that you are. His fight against Derek Brunson, despite being a win, was a terrible performance from both guys. I was laughing during this fight because of how bad they looked. It was unreal that was a high-level middleweight fight. He beat Darren Till after he gassed out in the first round. Till took over in the second round, throwing absolutely nothing. I think it was just a 1-2, repeatedly, over and over again. And then Brad Tavares, he beat Brad Tavares, but he really had to push deep to beat Brad Tavares. And I know Dricus du Plessis recently got that nose surgery. I'm happy for him. I hope it gives him better cardio, but the problem is, Robert Whittaker is just so much better than these guys, man. And he's proved it time and time again. I personally am on the side that does believe that Adesanya beat Whittaker, and that does hurt me to say because I'm not Adesanya's biggest fan. But I do believe Whittaker did lose to Adesanya. But I also do believe that Whittaker would stand a very good chance of beating Israel Adesanya in a trilogy if they did fight each other. Whittaker went out there, outclassed Marvin Vittori, did it with ease as well. Didn't look like he suffered any sort of setback whatsoever in that fight. He's just proved time and time again he's better than these guys. And Dricus du Plessis is not having impressive performances at all. I'm not impressed. I'm George St. Pierre. I'm not impressed by your performance. I'm genuinely not impressed by Dricus du Plessis when it comes to this matchup. I picked Dricus du Plessis to beat Derek Brunson. I picked him to beat Darren Till. I picked him to beat Brad Tavares. And I picked him to knock out Trevin Giles as well when I had my YouTube channel, which is almost 2 years old now. I've been there and I've done that, and I've picked Dricus du Plessis through the whole way, but I know that he's not Robert Whittaker's level. I'm prepared for the Lucas Tracy apology video if Whittaker does lose, but I would be so surprised if Whittaker doesn't win this fight. And I'd be so surprised. I'm going to pick Whittaker to get his first finish since 2017. Robert Whittaker has not finished anybody since 2017. That is 6 years ago. This man was 26 years old and probably a welterweight when this happened. I think he does it. If Dricus du Plessis does gas out like he has in the past, Whittaker's just going to tee off on him in the second and the third rounds and get a third round stoppage. Robert Whittaker, round 3 KO. Let's go. Do it for me, Whittaker. I don't want to have to make the Lucas Tracy apology video. Bo Nickal taking on Tresean Gore. I'm going to be going with Bo Nickal here. I mean, everyone kind of is. I mean, we're looking at minus 1,200 favorite, minus 1,500 favorite, plus 700 on Tresean Gore. Justified, I mean, it's MMA, so I don't think any minus 1,500 favorites really should exist in MMA, unless it is Joanderson Brito versus Weston Wilson, where I did justify it. I genuinely did believe that was justified. This one, not so much. Now, Bo Nickal looked incredible on Dana White's Contender Series. He did. He beat Dick Borrego, who I believe was like a Taekwondo Olympian, youth Olympian, sorry, not Olympian, but a youth Olympian. Beat him up, beat him by submission. Donovan Beard, good step up in competition. Very good step up in competition. Maybe not a UFC level competition, but it's still a very good step up. And then against Jamie Pickett, he beat Jamie Pickett, subbed him in the first round. But there was a little bit of controversy there, and Pickett was able to defend the initial shot. So can Tresean Gore go out there and defend the initial takedown? That's what it comes down to, because Tresean Gore probably will be the better striker in this matchup. Because Bo Nickal, we don't know how good guy is at striking. He knocks down Donovan Beard early and subbed him after that and looks really, really good on the ground. But Tresean Gore is a good striker. That's kind of what he's known for. I have kind of always thought he was a little bit overrated going into his UFC career because he was, at the end of the day, only 3-0. But people love to hype up on Tresean Gore. And there will be people picking Tresean Gore. But I'm still going to go with Bo Nickal by round 1 sub. You know, I don't see his takedowns being defended by Tresean. Tresean's a decent fighter, but it wouldn't do anything for Bo Nickal's career to beat Tresean, you know, so it's interesting. They're still trying to build up both slowly, which makes sense to me, because he's only 27 years old. He's only 4-0 in MMA at the end of the day. You don't have to rush this guy. You don't have to rush this guy into the top 15 or anything like that. Give him Tresean Gore. I think he beats Tresean Gore. I think he submits Tresean Gore in the very first round to give you Bo Nickal by submission in the very, very first round. And now we move on to the co-main event. Brandon Moreno taking on Alejandro Pantoja for the third time. I mean, I wouldn't really say it's a third fight because the first fight was an exhibition. I would just kind of call it a second fight. But I'm going to be picking Alejandro Pantoja. And I am actually pretty confident Alejandro Pantoja does win this fight. I do understand that Brandon Moreno has improved rapidly since their first fights. And in fact, I would have almost even say you cannot even compare the first two fights to this fight because they were so long ago. The last one was in 2018. The one before that was in 2016, where Brandon Moreno was 22 years old and 24 years old. He's now 30. He's much better now than he was back then. But I am still going to do a little bit of comparison. Like, I do understand you can't really do the comparison, but you can, because I do believe that Alejandro Pantoja, just his style in general, is a very bad matchup for Brandon Moreno, and that is why I am picking him in this matchup. Now, one thing that did actually surprise me is how big of an underdog Alejandro Pantoja is. I genuinely thought that maybe Alejandro Pantoja would be like Pickham's, but he's not, and he's not even close. Alejandro Pantoja is about plus 160, plus 170. Brandon Moreno is about minus 200 in this matchup, and aside from beating Davison Figueiredo and Kai Kara France recently, you know, Brandon Moreno just hasn't really beaten a guy with the sort of style of Alejandro Pantoja. Maybe you could argue that Figueiredo's got a similar style to Pantoja, maybe, but he doesn't, because Alejandro Pantoja is a really, really good grappler. Like, he's a really good grappler, and I believe that's where he's got the biggest advantage in this matchup. Moreno will be the better striker on the feet, and But I think when it comes to the wrestling and the grappling, I do think Alejandro Pantoja does have his number. I do believe that Alejandro Pantoja can go out there and submit Brandon Moreno, and I do actually believe that's actually what's going to happen. I think a lot of people might pick Moreno, and I think a lot of people will bring up similar points to what I'm going to bring up in this fight. That you can't, I don't think you can. I don't think you can compare the first fights to this one, because they are different fights. Pantoja and Moreno was much younger. Most notably as well, Alejandro Pantoja was so much more experienced than Brandon Moreno when they did fight in the Ultimate Fighter a long time ago. Moreno was like the 16th seed, you know, and Alejandro Pantoja was the favorite to win the entire thing. And then he went on to kind of have his own sort of success. I guess you could do a little bit of MMA math and say that he lost to Figueiredo and Askarov. And Moreno went to a draw with Askarov and beat Figueiredo like 2 times, I think it was. But at the end of the day, I've got Pantoja. I do believe Pantoja wins this fight. I do believe Pantoja is the much better grappler. I do believe Pantoja can put the pressure on Brandon Moreno, and I think that's kind of going to be it. I think Pantoja is going to be moving forward, throwing volume, and getting takedowns and going for takedowns. Whereas, you know, Brandon Moreno, he looked so good in his last fight. He did look really good against Figgy, and he looked really good against Kai Kara-France. Now, the thing is with that Kai Kara-France, though, that fight was close. That fight was really close. I know he won the fight by finish in the 3rd round, but the first 2 rounds were close. As someone that actually picked Kai Kara-France to win that matchup, Kai Kara-France I thought was down 2 rounds. One judge thought that Kai Kara-France was up 2 rounds, and then another judge had it 1-1, another judge had it 2 rounds to Moreno. I thought Moreno won both rounds, but Kai Kara-France was starting to take over that fight towards the end, and Kai Kara-France managed to figure him out in the 3rd round before he did get finished, and that was when he started to have his most success. I think Alejandro Pantoja is going to do that, but sooner. I think Alejandro Pantoja kind of already knows what Brandon Moreno was like, and I think he can go out there and figure out Brandon Moreno, and I think this is going to be controversial. Hot take. This is hot take territory. I think Pantoja goes out there and submits Brandon Moreno within 3 rounds. So getting Alejandro Pantoja by submission in the first 3 rounds, I do genuinely believe that he can beat Brandon Moreno, especially in the grappling. Maybe that's going to be a hot take, but I mean, I would be surprised if I saw more people picking Moreno than not. So let's see. And now we move on to Alexander Volkanovski taking on Yair Rodriguez. This is a tough fight for Volkanovski, and you're paying tax, in my opinion, as well, when you've got Volkanovski minus 400 on most sports books and around plus 300, plus 330-ish for Yair Rodriguez. I think this is the toughest matchup for Volkanovski at 145 pounds, and I think it's actually potentially even tougher than the Ilia Topuria fight, which is inevitable at this point. Yair Rodriguez is so good at striking, he made Max Holloway shoot for takedowns against him to secure the rounds to win the decision. Yair Rodriguez is a much improved grappler as well, to the point which he submitted Josh Emmett and had an armbar in on Brian Ortega, which caused Brian Ortega to get injured. Yair Rodriguez has made rapid improvements since he got that USADA suspension a few years ago. I mean, definitely not something that's brought up enough, but he did get a USADA suspension because he was avoiding USADA tests. That over that period of time, over the suspension where he wasn't fighting, he made rapid improvements. He fought for the first time in about 2 years against Max Holloway. Looked really good in that fight. He lost the decision, but he did win rounds against Holloway, and more importantly, he made Max Holloway shoot for takedowns to secure the rounds because Yair Rodriguez was potentially ahead on the feet, and Max Holloway was like, man, I'm going to have to take this guy down if I want to secure the round. And that's what Holloway did, because Holloway's a smart fighter, he's a good fight IQ, and that just tells you that Rodriguez is a legit striker. Went out there against Brian Ortega, was beating Brian Ortega, and then unfortunately the injury happened, but it was kind of caused by the armbar, as I said. And then he went out there, he did take some shots against Josh Emmett, but he rallied, ended up hurting Josh Emmett, beating Josh Emmett up, submitted him eventually. Great performance. For Alexander Volkanovski, though, I've said this multiple times, and like for some reason people always tend to make it a big deal and disagree with me, but Alexander Volkanovski is the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC. He's a great striker, he's a great wrestler, and he's a great grappler. He went out there and fought Makhachev to a point, to a close fight, which I personally do believe Islam Makhachev should have won, but he did fight Islam Makhachev to a fight that it was so close that people are arguing that Volkanovski should have won, and I can see it because there is a swing round in that fight that does determine the winner because the fight was so close. It was such a close fight, and Volkanovski looked so good. But what surprised me the most in that fight was how good Volkanovski's wrestling and his grappling was, because in a lot of his recent fights, you just see the striking. We only really saw striking against Holloway, against the Korean Zombie. Brian Ortega, we saw a bit of grappling, but for the most part, it was just Volkanovski beating the absolute piss out of Ortega on the feet. And I think that Volkanovski probably would be wise to mix it up in this matchup. I think Volkanovski would be smart to mix the striking with the grappling, because Yair Rodriguez could catch Volkanovski with something, you know? He does throw kicks, he does throw very effective kicks. You never know, maybe a kick sneaks into the liver, maybe a kick lands on the head and Volkanovski doesn't move his hand up fast enough. You don't really know. And I think Volkanovski's smartest path to victory probably would be to grapple Yair. But Yair's grappling has improved drastically. His BJJ has gotten so much better. But Volkanovski's just a beast, man. And we haven't seen Volkanovski slow down. We've seen no evidence of Volkanovski slowing down. It is worth noting that Volkanovski is almost 35 years old, and as with every single dominant champion, I always say this. There will be a point in time where you will have to fade them. And I don't think it's this time. The problem is, I've always said there's a point in time where you've got to fade them, and then I faded them at the wrong time. Like against Shevchenko. I thought Shevchenko was going to get past Grasso, and I was going to pick her to lose against Blanchfield, for example. Same thing with Nunes as well. I thought Nunes was going to beat Juliana Pena. I said there's going to be a point to fade Nunes, but it wasn't going to be this one. And then, of course, Nunes lost. It happens. But I do think there will be a point in time to fade Alexander Volkanovski, but I don't think it will be this one. Maybe someone's going to comment saying it is now, but I don't think it is. I think that he can get past Yair Rodriguez. You know, we've seen Yair Rodriguez domination on the ground before. Now, this was a long time ago against Frankie Edgar in 2017. We're talking about 6 years ago. And against Max Holloway as well. Max Holloway was able to get him down. So I think I can see Volkanovski mixing in the striking with the grappling. As I said though, Rodriguez is a very good striker and a great grappler. Can he keep the fight on the feet if Volkanovski decides to wrestle? I think not. I think that's actually Volkanovski's best path to victory is to take Yair Rodriguez down. So I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski to win by decision. Mixing up the wrestling, mixing up the striking. And Volkanovski's got really good ground and pound as well, which is worth noting. So let me know what you think of my picks. Let me know what you think of the card. Let me know if you're going to be at my UFC 290 Fight Companion live stream. And I do apologize, the video was a little bit rushed at times because I think I'm sick. I don't know if I am. I think it's just the consequences of living in a freezing house. But I am not feeling 100% right now. But with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it.